From the humble NES to the mighty PS5, the Final Fantasy franchise needs no introduction. As being one of the foremost JRPGs on the market, it has been pushing boundaries in music, visuals and storytelling for decades, setting an example of what it is to be a great JRPG. A large cast of lovable and deep characters, worlds with rich history that you can just lose yourself in, and villains that you can understand, sympathize and just love to hate. And all of it starts here. No, not there. Here, in Final Fantasy IV. Yes, you heard me right. The fourth one. Not 1, 2 or 3. And why is that? Well, even though those games were technical marvels on the NES, we cannot lie to ourselves and speak of them as anything more than proofs of concept. 1 was a quest to find MacGuffins to save the world from a princess kidnapping knight. 2 was a group of rebels fighting Satan. And 3 was the quest to literally defeat darkness itself, which, even though I love Kingdom Hearts, this is not the series for it. It is here, in Final Fantasy IV, that we finally see the glimpses of what one day will become the juggernaut of the JRPG genre that would bring us Sephiroth, Kefka, and many others. But it is here in Final Fantasy IV where we finally get our first memorable villain, Golbez. Prior to him, to be a Final Fantasy main villain, you only needed to do one thing, and it was to destroy and annihilate the world. Why you did it didn't fucking matter. And trust me, that is not because the developers didn't care or didn't know why. They didn't have enough space. Look, let me show you something. This is the size of Final Fantasies 1, 2 and 3, in that order. And as you can see, none of them are even cracking a megabyte. A megabyte. As you can undoubtedly see, fitting more than one text box per character would have been an accomplishment in and of itself, let alone to have a dialogue or someone exposit something for more than like a sentence. Thus, I don't believe it's crazy to assume that they simply didn't have the space necessary to flesh out characters, the main characters that is, let alone the antagonists who, at that time, were more so functions. They served a purpose, and as long as they fulfilled that purpose in a easy to explain manner, that was more than enough for what they were trying to do. And so, following the release of the next generation of consoles, and the drastic increase in file size and the power of the system itself, allowing the creators to fit more content in their games, that set the groundworks to finally let the developers show us what they were really capable of and the type of story they're able to tell when they're not limited by the amount of dialogue a character can have, accompanied by having multiple cutscenes throughout the game, and not only at the beginning or the end of it. And show us they did. Within the first 30 minutes of the game, we are shown more characterizations of our lead character than any other prior to him in their entire game. And in turn that is true for everybody else in the cast, Kain, Rosa, Yang, everyone. And so does Golbez. He talks and interacts with the cast for most of the game, be it indirectly or face to face. He is established as a threat early on when he attacks the Kingdom of Yang and kidnaps Rosa. And even when he's out of sight, he doesn't feel like a detached boss fight waiting to happen somewhere off in the distance. We're given context for his actions, we're shown his backstory, we know why he is doing what he's doing, even if it is misguided or under the control of somebody else, that still gives us plenty to work with, it gives us something to connect with, it shows that he is more than just a blank slate and a villain, he is an opposite of Cecil, he is somebody of his own being, and when he's finally freed from the control of Zirmas, he is able to show more character. He is able to show that he himself can feel sadness, he can feel remorse, he wants to atone for what he did. And that, my dear viewer, is something known as characterization. As something that writers usually use to show that a thing or a character is more than what they seem at first glance. And at this point, you might start to wonder, well, Grin, that is good and all, but wasn't this supposed to be about somebody else? Maybe somebody that's from not even that world, maybe not even from that game? Somebody more plant-like, you might say.
Cling to your sanity while you can.
Yes, and that's entirely right, but I needed you to know a few things beforehand, so that when I start talking about him, you'll be able to understand where I'm coming from. You'll be able to get my point of view, so to say. We needed to lay the ground soil, because you cannot talk about something being created simple on purpose without talking about creating something simple because of limitations, and without talking about something that was created with intent and complexity on purpose. But that is enough babble. Let us get to the bottom of this very shallow yet captivating pool. For those of you who don't know him, this is Exdeath. He is a tree. A cursed tree, I might add. and he is evil. Very evil. So evil in fact that he has only got one thing on his mind: to use the power of the void, a mystical, semi-sentient force that has existed since the time immemorial and was the origin of everything that is in this universe. It was used and manipulated by an evil wizard 1000 years ago to almost destroy the entire world, but was sealed in a rift created by splitting the world in two by separating the crystals of the world. Exdeath plans to use this power of the void to destroy everything in existence and return it to nothingness, to the bleak dark cold of the emptiness. And he really doesn't like turtles. And with a resume like that, how can you not love him? You know, some might say that he is simple, that he lacks depth, that his motivations are shallow. To which I say, what motivations? Tell me, please, exactly why is he doing all of this? Because he's Exdeath, of course. That's why. Contrary to his senior, Gobes, we are given absolutely no reason to sympathize with him. We don't care about why he became evil. He doesn't give us a deeper look into the world and its setting. Well, he kinda does, but hold on to that for a little bit. We'll get back to it. His backstory is treated less like a window into his tragic past, giving us a reason to care about him. And it's not meant to show us his vulnerable side or his weaknesses, even if he had any. No, he just kinda is. We don't even get a cutscene with him. The main antagonist and villain, the driving force of more than half of the story, isn't even shown the decency to have a small cutscene. In a game in which I might remind you, the developers put the care and effort to animate and create cutscenes of our characters doing stuff that were previously just described to us, from jumping perilous pits, tossing ropes, dancing, to even showing us exaggerated faces. We aren't even shown what he looked like before getting transformed into this metallic abomination of a wizard. And that is bloody genius in my opinion. Bear with me for a moment, will you? Even though he doesn't quite seem like a step forward in comparison to Gobes, and some might even argue that he is in fact a step back, we have gone from a person to a force of nature again. The same thing that the Cloud of Darkness or the Emperor were, kind of, or even Zande. They are purely forces of nature, just disguised as people. But look here. Unlike many other series, the Final Fantasy franchise isn't a linear story. Yes, a Game 7 might be following Game 6, but that doesn't mean that Game 7 is a continuation of Game 6. As a matter of fact, that is one of its strongest sides. It allows it to evolve, to reinvent itself whenever it needs to. Of course, there are things that carry over, the names of spells, items, creatures, things like that. But that doesn't mean that they don't hold on to things that worked in the prior entries. When I played through Final Fantasy IV, I was always thinking, hey, this Gobes guy feels very similar to Zande in this I'm you but better style, where both were villains that were ultimately controlled by a higher evil presence to be used as tools to destroy the world, but where Zande was overshadowed and almost entirely sidelined to the point where we even fight recolors of him in the final dungeon, and who was entirely replaced by the Cloud of Darkness. Gobes remained a part of the story and was a part of it to the bitter end. And now, whilst playing FF5, I had this feeling again. They were able to refine and better implement the ideas presented in previous games. They reworked the job system of 3, evolved and expanded the role of the crystals, took the characterization from 4 without sacrificing the diversity of personalities and the fun and interactions that they were able to bring to the table. This is a clear evolution through iteration, and so too, our antagonist shows the lessons that the developers have learned, taking the idea of the grand, pure evil that you defeat at the end of the game and moving him forward, without having to sacrifice the fun and interesting personalities that a minion or a follower type of character would usually do. They don't feel the need to have a switch up to replace him. That doesn't mean that we don't have a stand-in for that type of archetype. Whereas before we had a fake out, now we clearly know that this is the follower. In this case, Gilgamesh. who serves as a vessel to show the cruelty of this pure evil antagonist. But he's also allowed to be his own person. He's allowed to be funny, interesting, and he's not bound to uphold the stakes of the story on his own. Clearly, the choice to return to a simpler form of villainy is one made with intent in this game, and it's no longer a restriction upon the narrative. I think we were able to see what they were striving to do in Final Fantasy IV with the creation of Gobez. Now they're showing us that they were capable of crafting a character that so easily could have been fumbled and butchered the narrative in such a way that he stands potion to potion with the best of them, as a frightening, imposing threat that just so happens to have fun with what they're doing, fully and unironically being self-aware and striving to bring as much pain and suffering as possible. So how did they make it work? What is the secret ingredient that allows him to be so interesting in spite of his outward simplicity? Well, in media there is a clear divide in the perception of villainy. You've got characters that are built from the ground up to have some sort of internal or external to their motivation, driving them to commit acts of terror and to hurt others towards the achievement of a personal goal. Such characters are usually touted as relatable, or at the very least, as people that one can feasibly see themselves as. Their popularity is a clear indication for their success as literary elements, being able to connect with broader audiences. While the other form, either intentionally or not, doesn't concern itself with rationalizing the actions of the antagonist, nor about giving them a reason for their behavior. This type of character being more the embodiment of some natural or supernatural force, some kind of beast or animal that's gone wild, or people who have actively chosen to enact some kind of nefarious scheme for no apparent reason other than whatever internal pleasure they might derive from it, with this type being widely regarded as inferior to their more complex or more developed counterpart. However, as you can probably hazard to guess, like most things in life, it's not that simple. These two trains of thought don't cover everything that there is when it comes to writing an antagonist, let alone the main villain of a story. They also don't cover the reality of storytelling in general, and even less so in the medium of video games. For however true it may be that a character with a more complex reasoning may be more compelling on a theoretical standpoint, it is ultimately, as with most things, a question of execution and compatibility with the story or narrative that they are based in. And it really doesn't matter how complex a reasoning or a goal a character may have if it doesn't really match with the characterization that they have been given up until that point. And alongside that, a character also has to feel natural to the world and to the story they reside in. It allows the flow of the narrative to be seamless, moving from beat to beat without being bogged down or slowed or feeling contrived. And for as little that there is for Exdeath's characterization in comparison to Gobez's, it is not to the detriment to the story, for his purpose in it is not the same. Gobez was a direct mirror and a contrast to Cecil, the main character of the story, from his design, way of fighting and to the way he responds to the world around him, while still carrying his sense of dignity, duty and remorse. Whilst Exdeath has absolutely zero interest in any of the cast save Galuf maybe, for whom he just holds a grudge for sealing him away in their previous encounter. Bard's being entirely outside of his scope for the entirety of the story, never being recognized as anything more than a part of the group that's opposing him. I don't even believe he names the guy once. At first sight, having absolutely nothing to do with him save for fighting because their goals so happen to be in opposition to one another. So what is it that this one note of a character is doing so right then? If he isn't opposing the main character's ideals, he isn't narratively deep, and he isn't necessarily expanding the lore of the world? Well, the answer has been staring you in the face the entire time. It's presentation! The presence that he carries with himself is the simple thing that manages to make such a bland character a great and memorable villain, like a basil leaf in a stew. You don't taste it, but it makes it 10 times better when it is included, and you would know if it wasn't there. He isn't a villain who spends his days pondering the weight of his actions, but he's also not a villain that gets defeated by his own incompetence. We spend half the game trying to stop him, he is talked about with dread, and every person who knows who he is acts as if him being released would spell the end of the world. And for all intents and purposes, that is practically what happens. It's easy for this archetype to fall flat on his face, because most times they are just not given the weight they need to carry themselves and to be a proper threat. Someone who acts in evil ways but is harmless has no weight. They're practically an inconvenience and an annoyance to the story. Whilst our resident tree is given all the gravity he needs to carry himself and to properly back his words. Yes, he is having fun with it, but in the back of your head you're like, oh god, how do we stop him? How do we deal with this guy? And that is to be contrasted with our previous pure evil villains, the Cloud of Darkness and Zirmus, because whilst Exdeath is practically the same type of being, but he is clever, sadistic and malevolent. He portrays traits of a person, something human that is somewhat related to his origin as a tree that was imbued with the evil spirits of humans, and in that sense he kind of also represents the potential of what the Emperor was supposed to be, at least in my mind, a evil, egotistical being that just kind of has fun with what he's doing. Yes, he's conquering the world, or in Exdeath's case, destroying it, but he's still having fun with it. He literally is doing it for the love of the game. And all of that is being portrayed with this childlike, cartoony feeling to it, allowing it to feel light and brisk. Yes, he is a horrific monster, but he is not portrayed to us as someone who is uncharacteristically unlikable. You do not relate to him, but you're enjoying watching him do it. And it is in fact that part of his personality that allows him to be so interactive with our main cast. He talks to them, he belittles them, he insults them, and whenever they are face to face, he doesn't miss the opportunity to flex his power. It also allows us to see him being humbled. We see him lose again and again, but that doesn't actually serve to diminish his threat. It more so serves to show us that he is unstoppable. Yes, you can beat him now, you can seal him for a year, or 2, or 1,000, but he will come back. You have to find another way to deal with him. That ties back to his thematic resonance to the story, to how he is a opposition of the pure joy and wonder of the world. He wants to annihilate it. He doesn't want to see it. He derives joy from ushering into the destruction of everything, rather choosing to end it all for everybody, instead of having to deal with his own existence. But I'm getting beside myself and I'm going on a tangent, so let's get back on track. So yeah, that's Exdeath. I find him to be the most enjoyable pure evil villain thus far in the series. Granted, I've only played up to 5, and soon I'm going to play 6. Wait for the video on that one in the future, and if you don't want to miss another poor analysis of the series, why not hit the like button? Exdeath works because he's treated with respect. He has charm, he has personality, still manages to be a thematically resonant counter to our main character. Yes, they barely interact with one another, but that is not to his detriment. As I've stated before, he was meant to be simple, to fit a simple game, a simple story, made to show us what the developers were capable of crafting with more powerful system. His purpose in the story is to move it forward. And from the moment he's released, to the fight with him in the interdimensional rift, that is exactly what he does. And so, I believe he's a perfectly executed, pure evil villain. And that's what makes Exdeath so special.